Hey everybody, it's Raf here, and welcome back to another episode of the Canvas series, podcast about side hustlers and busy professionals, and how they are creating their systems for success. So in this episode, we had Kelly Foss join us. She is a brand and partnership consultant, co-founder of a local Toronto meetup group, co-host of the Millennial Minimalist podcast, and an active member in Toronto's art, culture, and entertainment scene. So with all that going on and more, you must be wondering, how on earth does she practice minimalism? In this episode, we go deep into her bullet journal system, how she manages her phone usage, and how she makes decisions on a day-to-day basis. So if you are someone who feels overwhelmed, has a lot on the go, and feels cluttered, and not just physically, but mentally, socially, or virtually, this episode is perfect for you. And my ask is, if you got any value from this episode, please share a post on Instagram or Facebook and let us know how you're applying minimalism and how it has helped benefit you in managing your day-to-day priorities. You can find me at myTechne.io, and you can find Kelly at Millennial Minimalists. And lastly, be sure to subscribe to the Canvas Series podcast, as our weekly show, Break the System, is really taking off. These 8-minute clips about stress, habits, sleep deprivation are all the key underpinnings that make up a system for success. So please, enjoy this episode, let us know what you think, and feel free to reach out to either Kelly or myself and learn more about how you can adapt this lifestyle into the systems for your everyday life. Enjoy. All right, Kelly, welcome to the Canvas series. I'm stoked to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Same here. I always find it to be, super interesting and exciting to record with a fellow podcaster, and just, especially given the larger mission that you're on and everything you're doing along the way. I'm thrilled, and I can't wait to, really unpack those systems with you. So, to set the stage, I typically ask my guests, who they are and what keeps them so busy. Now, I understand in some of your past podcast episodes and in our conversation, you have a bit of a distaste for the word being busy, right? And you distinguish between being busy with having priorities. So I think to start and to set the stage, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are and what are the different priorities right now in your life.
So I would say that I am an innately very ambitious person. However, there was a point in my life where I realized that I wasn't living the life that I knew I should be living, and that I needed to make some changes. And as successful as I was in my career, in my day jobs, so to speak, I knew that I had this voice in my head, and I had this itch that was saying, you're not utilizing your best skills. And so I always felt, that I needed to find whatever I'm missing. And so I started listening to self-help podcasts, Tom Bilyeu, The Impact Theory being one of them. And I became super motivated and inspired. However, I quickly realized that I wasn't taking action on all that motivation. I was motivated, but I wasn't actually taking action. I'm like, why aren't I taking action? I was busy, but I quickly realized that I wasn't busy in the right direction. I wasn't headed in the right direction. So I was busy, but I wasn't being intentional with my time. And so that's kind of what turned me to what I'm doing now is my side hustle. I'm hosting a podcast called Millennial Minimalists, which was initially inspired by a time in my life where I felt very lost. And a best friend of mine who's always kind of lived this way, always lived very simply. And she's always been very stress-free and just relaxed. And I was thinking, what is she doing? And she said, hey, you got to listen to this podcast called The Minimalists by The Minimalists. And I started listening, and they were super motivating, and they made me realize that I had so much excess in my life. And it was all the excess that was taking away from time that I could be using to start building the things that I really wanted to build. Now, my biggest passion is connecting people. And I love to stress that a sense of connection is what we're all here for. We're all here to build a connection with others. And that's how we find great meaning and fulfillment in our lives. And so I know that my why is to connect people. I love writing. I love producing. So it's been a natural fit for me. And it's something that I actually pursued 10 years ago in Los Angeles when I lived in LA. And I'm finally I finally found that momentum to start this again. So
I love that, right? And I think you did a great job at, one, differentiating between being busy and your priorities, and then identifying some of the priorities that you have going on. And I would add that the podcast and the community engagement that you do are just one of a few things that you have going on. And I think, throughout this podcast, I would love to unpack more of those. But, having established those set of priorities, that what, and your sense of mission, your version of success, I want to dig into the how, right? And specifically, how do you apply minimalism in your day-to-day life? I think the principles that is exemplified through this lifestyle is quite universal. And at myTechne, what we ultimately believe is that these principles of success are universal, but how they're applied is personal. So, to set the stage, I would love for you to describe to our listeners, what does minimalism mean to you, and why do you think this lifestyle, and in your words, this lifestyle template, why is this so busy for the modern busy person?
Why is it so busy for them?
Why is it so important for today's modern busy person?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would argue that the majority of people who are busy are not busy for the right reasons, or they're busy doing things that are like mindless scrolling through your phone, or it's being busy but not being intentional with how you are being busy, right? So we have this idea that the busier we are, the more successful we'll be. But in reality, that's not the case. It's about thinking about what are your goals and your values, and then making the steps in order to, reach them, right? And then also thinking about what's important in your life and what needs your time, right? And what are the things that you want to give time to? And a lot of us, we don't sit back and ask us those questions. And those questions are so important. And that's what minimalism uncovered for me. It started with decluttering my closet. And then it moved to realizing that there was tons of virtual clutter in my life. And I would say that's the biggest change that I've made, is being able to step back and analyze, hey, what is taking most of my time? And I found that it was social media. And it was, on my computer, scrolling through Google, doing all these things, reacting to my phone, reacting to my message, living reactively. And I quickly realized, this is not in the direction of where I want to go. And I need to be more mindful with these devices, because they started owning me. And I started to realize, no, we need to own these devices. And funny enough, I actually just finished a book called Digital Minimalism by a guy named Cal Newport. He's actually a computer scientist. And he argues that these tools are not good or bad. It's just how we use them, right? So if we can use them to our advantage, and if they amplify our lives, then let's definitely use them. But if we have tons of apps on our phone that we're not using every day and they don't add value to our lives, it's just noise. So it's differentiating between that. So
I love that. So, with your phone and your virtual aspect, when it comes to decluttering from a virtual perspective, help the listeners understand, if they opened up, Kelly Foss's phone right now, what can they expect to see? And then from there, I want to segue into, like you mentioned, how our phone is a distraction, and how by controlling our usage with the phone, in the past, you talked about how it can allow us to focus more, how it can allow us to be more productive. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
But how? Okay. So I would actually love to show my phone right now. It's not with me, but it's pretty amazing. So I love to, whenever I'm in a group setting, I love to put my phone away and be fully present. So some of the biggest advantages are being able to be more present with those who you're around, but also with yourself, right? I took out my AirPods for the first time the other day, and I was like, wow, the world is a really noisy place. It was in a beautiful place, right? So my phone it's actually quite interesting. So I've eliminated all the apps that aren't adding value to my everyday. My screen is blank. My first screen is blank. I have 4 icons at the bottom of my phone. I have my phone, so that I'm using my phone, my device, as a phone. I have my messages, I have WhatsApp, and I have a little file full of all of those apps that add value to my everyday. And so it's interesting. So we have an episode where we talk about the minimalist smartphone, and we showcase how we've simplified our iPhones, and we have a picture of that. So it just gives people some ideas on what they can do to be more intentional with those devices, right? So
for sure. I remember in the summer, I did a 2-week social media detox where I just laid off Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything. And I found that, when I returned to it, that I was a lot more intentional about my social media usage, that I wasn't just, it became very salient how often, I would just pull up my phone and just scroll, when I'm waiting for the elevator, when I'm waiting for my coffee, when I'm waiting for the streetcar. And then, it really made me think, why don't I look up? Why don't I, talk to someone if someone, looks receptive to that, right? And it's just incredible about how much time we check our phones. And I can't remember what the stat was, but we check our phone. Do you have the stat on top of your head? Or
I don't have the stat, but I've heard
some
crazy
stats. Amount.
Yeah, and we pick up our phones 1,000 times in one day. What? There are people that do that.
It's crazy, right? So, when we think about, productivity, right? I want to pull a quote that you said in the past,
okay.
in that, quality productivity means creating an effective and balanced lifestyle that you can keep up every day. So, let's talk about the everyday, right? And in particular, I want to unpack a physical tool that you use as to help you practice minimalism, and that is your bullet journal, right? Mm-hmm. And you've also said that if you can brush your teeth, you can review your bullet journal.
Absolutely.
So for all the listeners listening, can you describe what is the bullet journal system, mm-hmm. and why does it work for you?
Yeah, so the bullet journal is basically an analog calendar. A way of basically tracking your current tasks, your daily tasks, and your future goals and your accomplishments. So what I do every week, every Sunday, I write down my goals for the week and all of my tasks. I don't specifically put my work meetings within, because work meetings are always changing, right? So for that, it's majority a combination of work hours and then personal things, tasks of mine that I need to accomplish that week, whether that's social or family stuff. So yeah, it's really helped me strengthen my word. And I was originally introduced to it by a mentor figure of mine, who works in the mining business, and his is a piece of art. And there's so many ways to basically draw out your bullet journal. It's not, one size fits all. It's very creative. You can be very creative with it. And for me, it's basically been my Bible. And funny enough, Lauren, who I host the Millennial Minimalist with me, she originally was, she's like, I don't know about this bullet journal thing. It's a physical piece. We're a minimalist. We don't need anything physical. But minimalists still need to own things. And we realized that this little black book that can last a year is super valuable, and it keeps me on track. And I still have my online calendar for my work stuff. But this I review every single night before bed, so that I can start every morning knowing exactly what the day brings.
Interesting. So in addition to mapping out your week's goals and tasks along the way, and effectively like a calendar system, in the past I believe you've talked about using your bullet journal as a way to track your long-term goals, but then track the progress you make along the way. Mm-hmm. Can you share with the listeners what that looks like?
Yes. So in the bullet journal, basically you draw out a month. So let's say, it's the month of March. We have tons of different goals that we want to accomplish that month. So you write them all out. And then you turn the page and it goes week by week. And the beauty of the bullet journal is that you feel so much more accomplished. The whole idea is that you can no longer say that your life is passing you by, because you can see your life happening every single day. And, I have 3 to 4 tasks or 8 tasks in one day. And just the ability of crossing things out makes you feel so accomplished. Even minor things. Just even the smallest things, like, get your license renewed, cross out, that's done. You recording this podcast, cross out, one step closer to that long-term goal. And if you don't accomplish that long-term goal, you can then take it to the next month, right?
So all the listeners are probably wondering right now, how much time do you spend setting this up or maintaining it on a weekly, daily, monthly basis?
Maybe 5-10 minutes a week.
That's it?
That's it. It doesn't take long. People are like, oh, I don't have the time. Well, it's not you don't have the time. It's you're not making the time. We live in a world where we don't have much focus, attention anymore. We don't have the attention anymore. One of the reasons why I declutter my phone is because I felt like my focus was fragmented. It was just like my phone telling me react, when I didn't need to react immediately. And a lot of the time I found myself looking at my email or my mailbox. I react to it, but I wouldn't actually respond to it until I sat down at my computer.
Interesting.
So what's the point?
So before I go down that path, because I really want to, I want to close a loop on this bullet journal piece, right? Like you talked about how there's a lot of flexibility in the system and how you've customized and created it in a way that works for you. So I'm curious, for all the listeners listening, what has been the major changes that you've applied to your bullet journal system? And then I think for all the folks who are considering to adopt the system, what tips or advice do you have for them to start using this process and then start getting benefits from it as soon as possible?
Yeah, okay. First off, just start slow. So Lauren, she got my best friend who co-hosts Millennial Minimalist with me. She started getting into it. So I convinced her, she got on board, and still today she just is obsessed with it. It's changed her life. And originally she was very reluctant. So she started just cramming every single hour, and she forgot to actually create space for herself, right? So, and that's super important. We need a lot of mental fitness. I believe in that. But we also need times to decompress and clear our minds, right? So, and she wasn't doing that. And she just found it very tough. She's like, this is so challenging. I'm like, the bullet journal isn't challenging. It's how you're setting up each day that is challenging. So for her, it was difficult. Now, I would admit that, no one's perfect. I'll admit that there have been a couple days that have gone by where I'm not filling out my bullet journal. And I realized, no, you can't do that. That I was falling off track for a little bit, and then I got back on track. And you know what? We're human. It happens. But the bullet journal, the minimalist lifestyle, all of this, it requires maintenance. But it doesn't take a lot of time. So that's the beauty, is you realize that once you simplify your life, you realize all the time that you get back, and then you can allot it for the things that add value to your everyday. In this book I just read, what fascinated me the most is that he said that digital addiction is one of the biggest global epidemics that we're facing right now. And I even admit, I was, and I potentially am addicted to my phone still, and I'm working on it. But now I've kind of set all of these changes, and I'm feeling them, and I have more time. I feel like I have more time. It's amazing.
So speaking of time, and you've talked a lot about, taking that time to reflect, work on yourself, really maintain your system. So I'm curious, is there a set time in each day or each week where you do this? I want the listeners to start to really think about how can they find the time to maintain and invest in their own mental well-being.
Honestly, that's the most important part. You're not going to be able to do anything efficiently or right if you don't take that time. A lot of the time we think that, so this is the problem, is we have these mental strategies. We say, oh, I'm going to go home and rest. I'm going to go home and rest. But what ends up happening is we're sitting on our couch, we're laying on our bed, and we're scrolling through our phones. And there's all this information and all this noise coming into our minds. And they're not actually relaxing. They're actually creating stress and anxiety without realizing. They're potentially learning, but at the same time, if that's their goal, great. But if their goal is just to relax, that's not good. Also, when it comes to yoga and meditation and all those great outlets to decompress, I love that. But what I really love is the fact that you shut your phone off for how long? Or your social media?
For 2 weeks at a time in the summer.
So, and that, I believe that's what you need to do. You need to do something bigger, because going and doing yoga, your yoga class and meditation is a beautiful thing if you've mastered every other area of your life. However, if you're living a crazy, stressful, anxious life, and you do that as your outlet and then you come back to that world, you're not going to solve the problem. You're not solving the root of the problem, right? Yeah, for that hour, you're feeling better. For the half an hour before, when you get back into work, you're feeling that motivation again. But you may actually... it's like the yo-yo diet. It's like you lose weight, you lose a little weight that day, and then you gain it back the next day. So you need to change the root of the problem. You need to be more mindful when you're doing these things. Like, hey, like, do I need to make habit changes? Like, is it just the outlet that I need, or do I need to make daily habit changes?
Okay, so speaking of habit changes, then what habit changes have you made since adopting this minimalism lifestyle, and what are some of the benefits you've seen to date?
Okay, yeah. So this lifestyle made me step back. I wrote out all my goals and my values in my life. I was lost in my life, and I said, my life is just going to pass me by. You always think, life is just going to bring all these things one day. It's going to come. No, you actually have to set a plan, and you actually have to make changes in your life. So I realized that I had a ton of ambition, but I wasn't taking action. So I started with my closet again. I started decluttering, and I started realizing that my morning routine was so long. And it was because I was reacting to my phone. So I stopped reacting to my phone in the morning. And I started cleaning. And I was, sifting through all these clothes in the morning, trying to figure out what I'm going to wear. I no longer do that. I have this capsule wardrobe. I have 15 to 20 pieces that I work with. And then the rest, seasonally are stored in another case under my bed. And then I realized my virtual clutter, and all of that clutter was hitting my mind, right? The mental clutter, the self-doubt, the fear, all of that noise that was holding me back from accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. Like, I love to write. I love to connect with people. I love to motivate people and encourage people to develop a passion. Like, that's why I'm here. And a lot of what I was doing day to day wasn't that. And now that I've cleared that excess, it is that. And I honestly feel like I am developing my best life today. And my goal is to inspire others to do the same.
For sure. I think, looking back to when I was in consulting, one of the first things I learned in strategy consulting is that, often we're so fixated on finding the right path forward. And that's definitely important, and I don't want to undermine that. But a big part of strategy as well is knowing what not to do, right? And I would think, as I think back to my last couple of years, what allowed me to be so effective with my time, energy, and attention really started with taking things out. Being very mindful of the habits I did, being very mindful of the tools and physical objects around me, being very mindful of the people I spent my time with, the communities I participated in. So I used to go to minimum one, probably 2 or 3 meetups or events or social gatherings a week. And, now that I've really questioned the utility of each of those events, every time I go to an event now, it's a lot more intentional. It's a lot more purposeful. And at the same time, I've bought myself back at least like 8 to 10 hours a week, which allows me to do the things I really want to do. So
Isn't it crazy?
Absolutely, right. It's been an absolute game changer. So, with that, I want to ask you about how you make decisions. And in the past, in your podcast episodes, you talked about the urgent versus important. So can you walk us through that framework? And then more importantly, how do you apply that framework in your day-to-day life? Right? Do you only use it for the big decisions? Do you only use it when you're planning your week with your bullet journal? Do you kind of have it on your phone as a wallpaper to remind you? Like, how do you keep it salient, and how do you make sure that you're always thinking about urgency versus important?
It starts in my bullet journal, but I think day to day, and I think everybody can relate to this, is you'll get messages, social messages, you'll get new work meetings, there's all this spontaneity in your day to day, right? That happens. And you have to make those decisions every single day. So again, your bullet journal is always, you're always tweaking it every day. That happens. But yeah, so I had to learn this the hard way. I used to be the most indecisive person in the world. And I would always tell my dad that. And he was like, I can never make a decision. He's like, I know, but you need to make a decision for yourself. I can't make your decision for you. He would always say that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Because I know myself best. That makes sense. And, you always go with your gut feeling. But they always say the gut is the first brain. But no, I would say that I've mastered that for myself. And I think everybody needs to get there. I'm not perfect, but again, it's what's important to you. For me, family, relationships are number one for me. So if it's something to do with family or a relationship, then that comes first. And my passion, my mission, so that involves my day job and my side hustle. That's number one, but also number two. Like if family again and a relationship confirmed, then that's first. So I always feel like a sense of connection should always be your number one. And so this is how I prioritize everything. And I've also learned a lot of people, they want to talk to you your day to day. And I can't speak on text message all day. And I prefer to be present. So I simply say, hey, good to hear from you. When can we catch up? When's a good day for you? Right? So then you get that in return and you can meet that person in person. And again, so now that I'm more aware of social media, I'm not just liking people's posts anymore. I'm stepping back and realizing, and you know what, there's a bit of that where we feel like we need to. If a friend has a baby, everybody's loving their baby's picture, you feel like, you gotta do it. If you don't do it, she's not gonna like you, or that's just mean. But it's not mean. What you can do instead is you can text her or call her and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to meet your new daughter, and give her your time. So much more valuable, right? So these are some of the things you got to think about when you're making daily decisions, right? So
I love that. So, we've talked about the bullet journal. We've talked about phones. We've talked about decision making. What other systems would you say that you have in your life that allows you to practice minimalism on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I would say it's the lack of things. I would say it's getting rid of all of the stuff that has literally changed my life. I can't even begin to express how much it's changed my life, and I think that's the direction that we're all headed in, to be honest. I've always appreciated experiences over things. I feel like storytelling and experiences go a long way. But yeah, I just feel so much lighter, and that's helped with my day to day on a grand level. It's just, and I would say less so my physical space, more so my mental space. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing my stories, because your mind can really, really hold you back. And that's one of the biggest things. And I think a lot of us are held back by what others want for us, but the noise that's in our face every single second of every day, more so now than ever. And yeah, by clearing the excess, all of those passions and all of who is you, your innate identity shines, and you're like, wow, like you basically look at yourself in the mirror and you're super vulnerable by clearing your mind, and then it can just help you move in the right direction from there.
I love that.
Yeah.
So before we enter into the fire round questions, where can the audience find you online?
Yeah, so everybody can find us on Instagram and also on Facebook at Millennial Minimalists. I know it's a tongue tire, but
Perfect. So I do recommend everyone, if you do have questions around this lifestyle, and Kelly talks a lot about it on her podcast as well. So where can they find your podcast?
So you can find our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the big ones. So
perfect. So I do highly recommend for anyone who does want to learn more about this lifestyle and want to have a practical view of how to apply and practice it on a day-to-day basis. Right. Perfect. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions.
Perfect.
Let me know what are the first thoughts that come to mind.
Okay.
First question. What is one book you recommend everyone to read?
Mindset by Carol Dweck.
What is one productivity tool you cannot live without?
My bullet journal.
What is one decision that has made a difference in your life?
Clearing the excess in my life.
Last question. What is one actionable piece of advice you have for all the busy people listening?
Make sure that your busyness is heading you into the right direction.